Good evening. It is 6:30. Members of council are assembled when you're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to call to order this council meeting and welcome all members of the committee and everyone joining us in the gallery this evening and watching us via the live stream. Glad everybody's with us. Second item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Davinsky has that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. On a personal note, Mr. Mayor, and I suggest everyone do so, the medicine wheel is now been painted at the entrance of GC Houston School. It's very spectacular. And that's what was told to me, that it was spectacular. And I went by to have a second look, and indeed it is. That's education of this sort of thing in our community. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing, along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Thank you. Third item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments, but I do want to take just this moment to acknowledge the passing of former Southampton Mayor Art Eby. Art was a member of council in Southampton, a Reeve, and he was also the last mayor of Southampton before amalgamation. He was a much respected and well-loved teacher at the high school, and also a accomplished Rotarian and member of the curling club, and just a well-loved guy around town. So on behalf of Saugeen Shores Council and the whole community, we want to express our condolences to Art's wife, Christina, and to his entire family. And so with that, we move all the way down to, we have no minutes to adopt. So we're on to 10, report of municipal officers and committees. And the first report there is a county official plan amendment implementation, C-2023-008. And so there's a recommendation there, but we will hear a report, or a couple of reports, I guess, before we get to the recommendation, and I'll turn it over to Candace Ham.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. First, I would like to invite Monica Walker-Bolton. Monica is a planner for the County of Bruce to present her report and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Candace. Good evening, Mayor Charbonneau, Council. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of Bruce County. I'm working with my colleagues on a amendment to the Bruce County official plan. And I have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I will move through when giving these remarks. The first thing that I want to connect this project with is the ongoing work on a new official plan for Bruce County. So the material that has gone into our work on this standalone amendment to the current county official plan actually comes from the work that has been ongoing on creating a new county official plan. So the background in terms of the research and the development of these policies has actually not been just my own work. I've been working with our planning director and WSP planning group who have helped to develop these draft policies. The policies for the implementation amendment and why we call it the implementation amendment are covering section 6 and section 7 of the current county official plan. And section 6 is all about how the tools that are available under the Planning Act will be used to implement the goals and objectives of the county official plan. So this amendment is really focused on the toolbox that Bruce County and local municipalities have for implementing policy. And I will speak to that in the course of my slides. So we'll have my recommendation after Ms. Ham has had a chance to present. But as I said, this is connected to the official plan review project. So the county and our consultant WSP are currently drafting new policies, mapping, and that's all reflective of the very in-depth consultation process that has been ongoing for that process. Soon, as we enter into a new phase of the project, revised policies and mapping will be shared with local municipalities and brought out to the public. And we expected that to be happening as soon as new provincial policies are revealed to us from our Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So back in April, there was a new draft provincial planning statement. And with that proposed change, the policy framework that the county official plan is required to be consistent with was proposed to change in some dramatic ways. And until we know what framework the new county official plan has to really fit inside, then we don't think it would be appropriate to bring out the goals and objectives and the main part of the county official plan. But the good news is that the toolbox or the implementation is largely or completely, the policies that I'm bringing tonight are not affected by the draft changes. So that's why we think that it's appropriate at this time that we can move the project forward in one more incremental step by making this one-off amendment to the county official plan that will in that way advance the OP project forward. So as this slide says, we're targeting spring, summer of 2024 for the new county official plan. And this is what I was just talking about at the PPS changes. So April 2003 is when the changes were announced to us. And we are expecting that winter 2024 is when we were told that we might see the final draft that the province is proposing to pass. So we're eagerly awaiting seeing that. It might be something like January based on some of the talk that we've heard. So once that happens, there'll be new movement forward on the bulk of the official plan project. But as I said, this implementation amendment is something that's largely unaffected and we can move forward on it now. So as I mentioned, section 6 implementation, that's where the name implementation amendment comes from. Section 7, much shorter section that talks about how we interpret the plan. And then there are a few key changes in the servicing and Niagara Escarpment plan, which are earlier in the plan, just a few key tweaks out of section 4. So to summarize the key changes, really what the implementation amendment does is it enables certain planning tools that are available to the county and local municipalities under the Planning Act. So an example of one of those that's new that wasn't there before would be community planning permit systems. And I know that's something that Saugeen Shores is a leader in because you're already starting to work in that area. Because folks have asked, the county official plan doesn't need to be amended in order to enable you to bring in community planning permit systems. The work that you're already doing will enable that. But there may be other municipalities out there that aren't prepared to make amendments to their local official plans. And one of the nice things about the way that we're setting up the implementation section of the county official plan is it will enable the tools for local municipalities for the county official plan to be the plan in effect when local plans don't have policies in effect for certain tools. The other goal we had was to reduce the wordiness of policies, and really our goal there was to make it more usable for the folks that that use it, and that could include members of the public, planners like myself, members of council. When we reduce the words, we make something easier to understand and easier to digest. The other thing that's actually a good functional change is taking out specific wording that's really just a cut and paste out of provincial policy. We've found lately that provincial policy can change, and that when you copy verbatim what might be in the provincial policy statement or the planning act, and then that word goes and changes, that you have to go back and amend your plan. So instead, we've used broad language that says, in keeping with provincial direction, you should do this, or in accordance with provincial direction, you should do that. And so it really references outside of the plan to the relevant planning legislation that's out there. And then what we've done is, because folks sometimes like to have it in the county official plan so they don't have to hunt around in a lot of other documents to find the direction, we've added the did you know boxes. So the did you know boxes are little call out boxes in the margin that explain how certain tools under the Planning Act or other guidelines or policies or plans of the province, how they work. And then you can find the information that you need, but these do you know boxes they're not the direct policy, so they can be updated as legislation changes. So these are all some of the things that we're doing to make the county's official plan a bit more functional and easy to use. So that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. The reason I'm here tonight, and I really appreciate the invitation, should have led with this. The reason I'm here tonight is because the county has asked for input from all 8 local municipalities on the amendment to see if it's worded right and is working and effective for what we're hoping it would work for you guys. And so your input and staff's input that I've been receiving throughout this process is very much appreciated, and it's valuable to ensuring that we get a good product in the end. So that will conclude my remarks, and I'm available when presentations are through if there's any follow-up questions.
All right, thanks, Monica. And I will roll into my report. So this evening, my report is in regard to the amendment that Monica just discussed. So it's the intention of the county that the proposed changes will make the plan more concise, easier to use, while making the policies of the plan more effective. As part of the consultation process for this amendment, the county hosted information sessions that were attended by myself and other town staff. I provided preliminary feedback to the county and met with the county senior planner, Monica Walker-Bolton, individually, which helped in my review and with the preparation of these comments. Approximately 60 changes have been proposed, many of which town staff have no issues or concerns with. A number of the proposed changes are anticipated to have a positive impact on the town's planning process, including municipalities having the ability to refer to the county official plan as the applicable policy framework if specific policies have not been developed at the local level. Alternative public consultation members can be implemented, and procedures to administer public consultation can be delegated by the approval authority. And local municipalities may delegate the authority to pass minor bylaws to a committee or an authorized municipal officer. Town staff do have questions about some of the proposed changes and require for clarification on the items listed in the table within my report. It is noted that if the proposed implementation amendment is adopted by the county, the town would not be required to add, revise, or remove any town official plan policies in order to conform to the county official plan. But we are of the opinion that, staff are of the opinion that there are it would be to our advantage to implement or incorporate a number of the items that the county is considering into our own official plan. So staff intend to conduct further research and will potentially bring items forward to a future meeting for consideration by town council. Potential actions and amendments may include amending the town official plan to allow for the Bruce County official plan to be referred to as the applicable policy framework where we don't have specific town policies. The town's consultation and community engagement policies could be revised to include alternative public consultation measures, the authority to pass minor bylaws, such as applying or removing holdings, Temporary use bylaws and minor administration amendments could be delegated to a committee or an authorized municipal officer. And the town could pass a bylaw to require pre-submission consultation for Planning Act applications that are approved by the town. On the whole, town staff are happy with the proposed amendments. I do note, however, that there are a number of points that could benefit from further clarification. If supported, the town will provide a copy of my report and any resolution of council to the county. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you to you both. So there is a resolution or a recommended resolution, and that is that this County Official Plan Amendment Implementation C 2023-008 report be received for information, and the council endorse the comments in this report and forward them to the county for consideration in Bruce County Official Plan Amendment C 2023-008. Is there a mover and seconder to get that on the floor? And then we'll have discussion. Councillor Grace and the Vice Deputy Mayor, questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Monica and Candace. First of all, I think your suggestions of streamlining are really, really good, making it more user-friendly for everyone who needs to use it. I do have a question about the, I guess this is for Candace, about the alternative public consultation measures. You gave that as an example. What would some examples of this be?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. It would need to be drafted as a bylaw, so there hasn't been a lot of research put into that to date. What I can say is that currently the Planning Act requires that for large amendments that if there isn't possible to do the door-to-door notification in terms of public mailouts to each individual, that it specifies that the only alternative measure is to do postings in the local newspaper, which can prove to be difficult to first contact the newspaper. I think our local rep is actually not actually local, to get those ads in the local papers in terms of timing and ensuring we're giving proper notice. So potentially it could be looked at alternative measures in terms of notification in advance of a public meeting. Again, for example, haven't done the research, but maybe on our municipal website would suffice, or different types of social media, for example. But it would have to be drafted as a bylaw that our council would pass and adopt before those policies would change.
What about email? I know not everybody uses email, but I would think a vast majority now would, and probably have their emails registered with the town in some way. I believe the town is making an effort to try to get more people using that to pay their taxes and things like that.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Definitely something to explore. The Planning Act specifies that the information needs to be from the municipal tax roll. So there is an impact component to getting that information as well. So I'm not certain. It would be discussions with the clerk's department on whether email is a feasible option.
Okay, further comments or questions from members? Councillor Dubinsky.
Short and sweet, having read this. Thanks to both Monica and Candace for their reports. Making government documents shorter and easier to read is a step in the right direction. I've always maintained that, and I'm glad we're at this point. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Stack.
Well, now I feel like I'm going to say the opposite of what Councillor Dubinsky just said. So just a couple of things. All kidding aside, I think it's great to simplify. This is probably some pain I've had when I've drafted things in the past. Just be mindful of sometimes the lack of language can cause as much confusion. And when I read through this, I noted a couple of instances, and it was difficult for me to tell whether it was by design or not. We're in the same paragraph you'll use may, shall, will. And so I don't know if that was intentional. I know it's just a draft, but I just want to make sure, because those words often clog people or can confuse people. Maybe it just confuses me. I may read into it too much, but again, I think overall simplifications is the right way to go. But I just ask that we be particularly mindful, particularly when we're flipping between in the same subsection, may and shall. It just concerns me that whether that was intentional or not, it's not clear from the drafting whether those types of language choices were intentional, and it will be meaningful when people are interpreting it, but otherwise, great.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further. Yeah, I think it's a positive change on the whole, not only in terms of the simplification of the document, but in terms of the simplification of the process, right? Like that, allowing the county document to supersede in places where the local official plans are silent is a good smoothing out of the process and enables things to move with more alacrity. And then we won't need to do a bunch of amendments and things like, I think not including the provincial language is a really smart move and one that is really timely. And certainly these changes are timely. You can see references, there's a reference in there to waste diversion targets for the year 2000. So this document is deeply and badly out of date, which the county is well aware of and has been working on these amendments for several years and has been held up for several reasons. And so it's good to see some amendments, some large cleanup amendments happening here that we're actually going to get done. I know that some of the bigger stuff like the natural heritage systems and other things are held up and for a while, maybe till the end of 2024. I hope you're not being optimistic in those numbers, but held up for a while until we can get some direction from the province. But nevertheless, it's good to see some portion of this moving forward. I did have one question, and it has to do with, so then several instances in here, you see references to the delegation of authority, right, from county council. And when I read that, my expectation is county council and the county administration is imagining those delegations happening internally inside the county, right? A delegation from council to its staff or to a committee of council. But I wonder if the county has considered or if the county would consider offering some language in here to clarify that it could delegate authorities for things like site plan approval, plan of subdivision approval, consents to local councils. Is that something that that could be clarified in here or ought to be clarified? I think it's something that we've talked about back and forth between the municipality, between the town of Saugeen Shores and the county in the past, and it would be nice to have clarity in the plan that the council of the county of Bruce could delegate its decision-making authorities, for example, to this council.
Thank you for the question, Mayor Charbonneau. So before I answer your direct question, there was an indirect thing that I wanted to clarify, and we've run into this problem before. When we talk about winter of 2024, we actually get winter twice in 2024. So it's the first winter that that phrase, winter 2024, was the phrase that was given to us by our MMAH rep of when we might expect the new PPS changes. So that's why we use that phrase, even though it's kind of ambiguous. So no, we don't expect that the county OP process should have to take the whole year of 2024. We're still targeting spring, summer to make an adopted new OP. But thanks for letting me maybe buy a little bit of time with that ambiguity. So the other question was, is there an opportunity that's offered within the Bruce County official plan for delegation of certain county planning approvals to the lower tier? And the answer is yes. We think that that is already covered when it says county council or its delegate. Because the Planning Act does clearly say that for certain types of county approvals, they can be delegated to a lower tier. So, for example, plans of subdivision are clearly outlined as being able to be delegated to a lower tier, and same with consents. So those would be two examples of items that are already covered in the Planning Act, and which would lead to the other question is, like, could there be more clarification added in the county OP? I would say we were trying to avoid a lot of extra wording in the county OP, as I explained. However, if it's something that we want to clarify, that's what those fun did you know boxes are good for. So we could easily add another call out in the margins that specifically references those parts of the Planning Act that I just mentioned. And it's just a little clip and paste and it's easy. So if that's something that's important to the town, would welcome that type of a comment in your official comments that you're providing.
Really, well, it's something that's important to me. I don't know if it's something that's important to the town, and I'll have another shot at giving comments later on.
Okay.
But anyway, just to raise it at this point, and I appreciate your response. And the only other comment I'll make is to Candace's report, which I think is good, and I certainly support all the comments that she has offered up. I just the one item that I wanted to flag, and I understand it's not really part of the comments, but it may be pending, and I wanted staff to know my opinion on it. The notion of delegating the authority to pass bylaws of any kind, I oppose that. I think council, the authority to pass bylaws should be held entirely by council, no matter how minor. So that's not one that I'll be interested in to see. Well, you can bring it back, but I won't be supporting it, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway, but otherwise, it's well, I shouldn't say otherwise. It's a good report, and I appreciate all the work you've done on it. It's good comments, and I thank you for offering them. If there's nothing else, you've heard the recommendation, and I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to number 2, exemption from part lot control, B-2023-033 for golf links. And we'll turn that over to Karina Smith for the report.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So I am before you this evening with a bylaw relating to an exemption from part lot control. This application is for a site in the Summerside subdivision. It was a block within that subdivision and has received final approval. The applicant in this particular case is proposing townhouse units on the site. 12 of those units have been constructed, and there's another, I believe it's 50 to be built to the rear of those existing units. In this case, the applicant is seeking an exemption from part lot control, and what that essentially means is that they are seeking to allow for those lands to be subdivided further from the current block to allow for each of those already constructed townhouse units to be sold individually as freehold units. So the applicant does meet the requirements for the exemption from part lot control. Those units are within an area that is designated and zoned for that use, and they did already just a short time ago receive a minor variance approval to facilitate this part lot control exemption. So we have received and provided to the clerk a letter along with the draft bylaw, which outlines those lots that are intended to be created, and there are some easements associated with those as well. And we have also included the registered reference plan, which is a requirement to provide along with the bylaw. If approved by council this evening, that bylaw would then go to the county, who then issues its approval, and then that can be registered on registered on title, and then allow for those units to be sold. We also just wanted to highlight that this block in its entirety was subject to site plan control. And so that has gone through a town process, and the original subdivision process had also gone through a public process as well. So this is just facilitating the division of those existing units. And so we feel that no further notice to the public is required for this.
Okay, thank you. So there is a proposed resolution that council adopt bylaw 101-2023 for exemption from part lot control, file B-2023-033, and that it be forwarded to Bruce County Council for approval. Is there a mover and seconder for the resolution? Stack and the Vice Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? The Vice Deputy Mayor and then Grace.
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Mayor. I drive by that property quite often. I was wondering in the last year why there were for sale signs on there, and then they came down. Now they're back up again. And I wasn't aware there was this problem with exemption from part land control, but I now know why. I just wanted to make a comment that the developer there, I thought he did just an excellent job. That's the missing middle of those townhouses, in that $500,000 range, whatever it is. But seems still high, but it's that missing middle. And I just want to make comment about him. I really thought he did a great job with with the landscaped and open space area. It's ranging from 38% to 55% is what I'm reading. And it's an attractive development. So I think he's doing a good job, and I'm looking forward to seeing the other units to the east. So I obviously will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Well, I was just going to ask what the price range would be, but it sounds like, okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, you said they're going to be sold as freehold townhomes. So does that mean there's the owner owns the building but not the land, and then the land would be under like a condominium agreement?
And no, they would own the land as well as the unit.
Okay, so they're actually subdividing the lots, and the land and the building is for sale.
That's correct.
All right, and are the address of these is on Waterloo Street?
Yes, that's correct.
And this is a different Waterloo Street than the other Waterloo Street in Port Elgin, right? But you can't drive from one Waterloo Street to the other Waterloo Street.
That is correct. This would be the north section of
So
Waterloo.
it's
Street.
Waterloo Street North.
Yes.
Perhaps we should change the name to Waterloo Street North. So I know people that live on Waterloo Street North, and they have trouble getting parcels delivered and all sorts of different things because the two roads they're not contiguous. So maybe that's something we can look at before we get too far down the road of putting more subdivisions along Waterloo Street North. Is just call it Waterloo Street North. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good note for another discussion. Are there further comments about this item? If not, then all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. All right, so we're on to item 3 then, which is Chapel Side Road options analysis and the manager development services.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. I just want to acknowledge that, apart from me, there's other people in the audience that can help out. Kristen Schreider and Pete Nechtel, as well as Karina Smith, if there is discussion on the zoning. So this report was referred to staff to prepare after the September 25th meeting of council, where the draft zoning bylaw was presented and then it was deferred by council pending a report analyzing other options for use of the Chapel Side Road in conjunction with the proposed zoning amendment. So I want to firstly remind council of that first, the recommended option, which is that the bylaw, as it's shown attached, to be passed as it was presented by the county, with one small change, that the date that was referring to November is now referring to March. And this option entails no year-round use of Chapel Side Road, and approval of the option would require if the proponent were to proceed, would require the installation of a driveway from the business directly to concession 10 road, subject to archaeological investigation. The other options that are being analyzed in this report are these. The first is that the road would be sold to adjacent landowners, and this would mean declaring that road segment surplus to the town needs, and the process to consider selling it or disposing of it to adjacent landowners is what's described here. In this case, there's more than one adjacent landowner who may wish to purchase the road. It's noteworthy that the smallest lot uses Chapel Side Road for access. There's sort of a double access, one on concession 10 and then one on this side road. That there's a reminder that the road is also subject to an agreement with the Southampton Snowmobile Club, which may be need to be considered if the road would be sold. And then in this case, there's also a safety improvement that the access to the business would be closer to the rise in concession 10 if the road was used. And in fact, the conceptual driveway, as I've shown in green on here, is a better sight line from the crest of the hill before you hit to the curb. The second option is to allow use of the side road through an agreement. And with this option, the access for the business could continue, but it'd be securing, acknowledging operational maintenance requirements through an agreement. That would be, it's not quite a standard agreement, but where we've done this before, it's often referred to as a no demand for services agreement. And other concerns expressed by council could also be entered into through that agreement, such as a dust suppression or other concerns. And then the final option presented is that the road could be open for year-round operations, and that would require the adjacent landowner, the proposed property owner that's the proponent to design and upgrade the road to a year-round rural cross-section. And then after reconstruction, the town would have to begin normal maintenance of the road. And we can get into more detail for all of these options if council wishes. So that's the report.
Okay, thank you. So just some couple of comments on the process here before I take questions or comments. So there is a resolution here that council adopt bylaw 78/2023 to approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2023-053. For clarity, if council votes for that recommendation, you will be approving the recommendation, including the recommended option that's before us, i.e. the option that entails no year-round use of Chapel Side Road and a separate driveway being installed for access to concession 10, the option that is recommended by staff. If council wishes to choose one of the three alternative options, what we will do is we will refer this resolution, we will refer the bylaw back to staff and ask them to redraft the bylaw, incorporating language to enact whichever option council chooses. So what I would like us to focus on this evening is choosing which alternative option or you want to choose, or if you want to go with the recommended option. Let's focus our discussion on that. Let's have a conversation about which one of these four options you want to pick, and then we will take whichever step is appropriate to enact your decision. So, comments or questions, Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I want to go with option 2, is allow use of side road through agreement. The people have a historical use of this road. It's a good use for a road to use it as a road. Snowmobiles run almost exclusively on private property through trails. If I'm not mistaken, like they run across all kinds of private property. Building a new road beside an existing road is fixing something that isn't broken. This property is adjacent to a gravel pit, a concrete plant. There are other landscaping businesses in that neighborhood. There's a window and door neighborhood in that business. Farm use is farm use, and we can't farm in town. I grew up on a small farm, and people shouldn't move to the country. I'm sorry, people shouldn't move to the country and then say, I want exemptions from activities that take a part of farming. So I think we're being punitive to this person by making them put in this road, get that assessment. And it says it's going to chew up a small amount of land, but it's going to have a very negative effect on his ability to farm that land by chopping it up with a road in the middle of it. I'm very firmly in favor of option 2.
So
Thank you.
Do you want to make a motion, Councillor Halpin, that council approve option number 2?
I will make a motion that we approve option 2.
It's seconded by Councillor Mayette. So it is moved and seconded that council adopt option number 2. Is there discussion to that resolution, the Vice Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I concur, Councillor Halpin. I think you're right on. It makes 0 sense to me to build a second road. 0 cents. I don't get it. And so I am also with option number 2. And in a perfect world, I think we should sell the road. I think it's a road to nowhere. Goes in behind the Port Elgin Cemetery, east of the Miller's Pit. No housing planned in there for probably ever, I would doubt, because of servicing and other things. So in a perfect world, I think we should sell it, but maybe longer term we can do that. But I think option 2 right now is the right way to go. I think as long as it's airtight with an agreement. I had a couple of questions about the revised bylaw. If we go that route, I'm assuming the bylaw would cover all those things off about naming the town as additional name insured and dust suppression and who maintains the road? I'm hoping the person that the name on the lease would, this shouldn't cost the town a penny. I wouldn't want us to be maintaining that road and fixing potholes and grading it for a landowner that we're leasing to. I think that should be their responsibility. So I don't know what the revised lease agreement would look like, or pardon me, a bylaw, but, and lease agreement. But I guess the question I have of staff is if number two option, if we go with number two option for the lease, and you have to redo the bylaw, how soon could that come back to council? Because I have two things. One of the items in the report says to March 31st that they would have to fulfill their obligations. I guess, should it be May 1st or June 1st if it comes back with a revision? Is that enough time to get the bylaw and negotiations done with the lease agreement? Should we change that also? Secondly, you talk about an archaeological study, Jay. Is that archaeological study only required if there's a new road constructed? Would there have to be an archaeological assessment if the bylaw is changed in favor of a lease agreement? Is there still that requirement or not?
Excuse me, thank you. So there's a few parts there. I guess the first one I'll answer is the date. So in the draft bylaw, we proposed the date of March 31st, but council can pick whatever date is, a reasonable date that compels the proponent to do something, so it doesn't sit in limbo forever. So that would be the first option one. I guess the characterization of a road, it's not a road, it's a driveway. The only part that would need to be built up to, say, an operational standard is the actual part where it connects to concession 10. Once you get on the property, I guess it doesn't really matter how they access the rear. They could drive over it, they could install gravel and do whatever they want. I mean, we don't maintain that. It's a rural area. We don't regulate that quality of the construction. So I guess that's the first part. The second part is how long, you asked how long would it take to come back? Well, I'd like to think we can once we have the clear direction from council, we've been working on some drafts and we can turn this around pretty quickly. I don't want to speak for, senior management and how we manage workload, but it can be pretty quick. And then I guess the final part is, you'll have to remind me, I should have made a mental note. About the archaeological. Certainly, we still recommend the archaeological. It's just that it would not be a requirement to deal with the road. If the proponent wanted to build something in the area of land that is shown with that holding provision, then they would have to do the archaeological. As I understand it, and as I understand the applicant's proposal, is that the main site alteration has already occurred. They would just be, the buildings as they are now, and if they wanted to put a new one, build a new barn, whatever, that's when we'd want the archaeological assessment to be completed.
So see, Mr. Mayor, so Jay, just so I'm clear, I think I am, only an archaeological assessment if there's further remediation to the property, like in terms of a new building. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And just to be clear, so if option two, if this resolution is approved, we will refer this to staff and we'll get a whole new bylaw drafted and amended. So those options like the date and those kinds of things, they'll be put back to staff and we'll get a whole new set of recommendations, which we don't need to debate tonight because we'll debate them when the bylaw comes back. Just for clarity, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I looked at this and I did send Jay a question about the possible location of the new driveway / road. If a couple of the concerns are noise, dust suppression, things like that, to me, putting the road on the east side of the property that's at the corner of the 10th and Chapel, it's just moving the problem. So to me, I would think that those factors could be mitigated on the Chapel Side Road by making sure that there are stringent enough requirements drafted as part of the bylaw draft, the draft bylaw. Thank you.
Comment to that, Manager of Development Services.
Sorry, I guess the driveway, again, that quality of that driveway is, a rural standard, whatever that means, in the sense that, yes, you live in an area where dust is a concern. It's just, you're right, we can control it if it's on the road property. We have the ability because we're the owner of the land. I do want to add about, sort of the road our driveway rather on the east side, prevailing winds blow the dust sand, further to the east, not into the house. So, I mean, it's a function of prevailing wind, not necessarily of a perception, real impact versus perceived impact. Nevertheless, you're correct. If we want to regulate it, we have the ability on the road.
Okay, are there for Councillor Maya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I seconded the motion to revise the recommendation, and I stand by that. I would just like to say that I'm not particularly pleased with the way that this has all come about. It occurs to me that this property, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was building permit was issued to build a accessory building for farming uses. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've forgotten the specific permitting language, but it was implement shed might have been a term that's cracking around my skull
Okay,
right now.
which is the typical building on a farm to store farming equipment and the like. And it clearly I've seen the building, and it looks like it's designed for, or at least its practical use for a building. A landscaping business is one that's there. So in this neighborhood, there seems to be a tendency towards the participants being disingenuous with regards to the purposes for their buildings. We had one here a few weeks ago across the road, and so I'm not particularly pleased with the way this has developed into a situation where the proposed use was one thing and the actual use was another. Whether that was intentional or not, it certainly appears that the parties were not being completely forthcoming with what the purposes were. But the assumption that the road could be used, and then subsequently asking for permission to use the road, and then when faced with an alternative, and presumably an expensive alternative to build a new road, we get inundated with concerns and reasons why that shouldn't have to be done. And quite frankly, I tend to agree with I think Councillor Halpin said, building a road across perfectly good farmland when there's a road right next to it doesn't really make any sense. So I'm inclined to agree with the alternative number 2, but I think that we just send a message somehow that this type of development, particularly in this quadrant of our community, needs to be tightened up. People need to be forthcoming what their purposes are, and when they build a shop, it's not a house. When they build apartment buildings, it's not a retail business. We're seeing a trend towards this, and the haphazard nature of what's happening in this quadrant of our community is not in keeping with the way that Saugeen Shores has been developed. I think if we go with, I think the Vice Deputy Mayor said a lease, but I don't think we're really talking about a lease agreement where the town is going to retain control and ownership of the road, but we will be giving what was the term Jay used, a alternative use agreement?
Yeah, no demand for services.
A no demand for service agreements, whereas the person who enters into that agreement takes on all responsibility and presumably indemnifies the town from any liability associated with what might happen on that road during on or off season. And I think maybe even requiring the applicant to maybe build a fence between the road and the house that fronts on concession 10, so that if not going to stop the sound and probably not going to stop the dust, but at least to give some sort of physical barrier that you don't have gravel trucks, and assumingly or reportedly many gravel trucks and many more trips on this road than what were estimated from the person. I feel for the people living there, but as was pointed out earlier by Councillor Halpin also, when you live in an agricultural zoned area, you have to be aware that there may be agricultural zoned uses in close proximity, myself included. They've been combining corn and causing lots of dust beside my house for the past couple of days, and that's just part of the living in the country. And so I'm supporting the alternative number 2, but I think the language needs to be very strict, very supportive of the adjacent landowners, that because it is right beside their house. I mean, it's very close. And whether their driveway on the Chapel Side Road is a legitimate one or not, I'm not sure, but they do use the Chapel Side Road for access to the rear of their property. And maybe that needs to be included in there as well. And certainly strict application of dust control for at least the first 100 yards or so down the road to stop that dust. And if we can come to an agreement like that, I think that's the best way forward on this. But I just, as I said at the beginning, I'm not particularly pleased with the way this whole thing has come about. It seems to be a recurring nature, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and so those are some good comments to inform staff's work should council adopt the resolution that's before us. Are there further comments from members? Councillor Stack and then Davinsky.
Yeah, so I won't support the revised motion, or the revised. I'm not going to support option 2, and the simple reason is to, we have seen quite a few instances where there have been residents who have opted not to comply with our rules when it comes to their applications and for the usage of their lands. And in this case, where I see is the one we saw a couple of weeks ago, for the honeybee building, didn't really affect anyone else. This does have an effect. And my concern is, by us making this new concession against the advice of our staff, we're really indicating that there are no consequences to failing to comply with the rules that the rest of the residents in our community comply with. So I caution us to continue to provide these concessions in instances like this, where there appears to be, whether it was an error or not, a decision not to comply with the rules, and then perhaps not be as forthcoming as they ought to have been with the intended use. And now we have residents voicing concerns, and we're opting not to follow the advice of our staff in this case. And I understand why. And, you know, as I've said before, I'm not born of the country, so I'm not accustomed to some of the uses that come with the land. So, you know, I'm not suggesting this is the end of the world, but I am increasingly uncomfortable with some of our decisions when there are no consequences to this type of behavior. So I won't be supporting any amendment other than to support what was recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davinsky.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And speaking of decisions, we dealt with this in September, I believe, or several weeks ago anyway. And it was obvious then that we were not going to support the construction of a second driveway. At least it appeared that way. And we said, all right, let's give it back to staff and draft a bylaw and come back to us again. And Jay, you've done that, but you've come up with the same recommendation. And I'm wondering why do you have, is there something we don't know? Why do you have the exact same recommendation that you knew was unpopular the last time?
The director.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yeah, I think the way to approach this is to understand that the direction to staff was not to come back with not the road. It was to come back with an analysis of the merits of a road versus a driveway and alternative ways of doing this that would not require construction of a driveway. And so that's the direction that we understood to be the goal of this report. And so that's what I would offer as the explanation of why the report has a recommendation that is like the one that we came back with. It's because, notwithstanding the other options we looked at, our view is that this new driveway is the way to go. But the options are here for council's consideration.
Okay. Further comments? Yeah, I think I would say I appreciate staff's work on this. I think you've given us options to consider, different ways to approach this, and also continue to provide us with your professional advice as to the way that you would recommend that we deal with it. And I don't have any difficulty with the option which is being recommended. I think that this is a little bit of a unique circumstance in that we have a municipal road which is not well used by anybody else. And so it's kind of a question of, we certainly don't want to maintain it. We don't want to be in the business of maintaining it. But we also don't want to put too heavy a burden on the property owner. So I think it's a good compromise. I would say that I think that this is a bit of an analogy has been drawn here between the situation down the road and this situation, and I think they're quite different. This is a problem with our zoning bylaw. And the problem with our zoning bylaw is that we don't provide any place in the municipality to build a landscaping business, but yet somehow magically we have a bunch of them in this zone. Right? Like we allow them in lots of places in the ag zone, just like it's being done here. So your average citizen would be forgiven, I think, for thinking that they could do that. And we have a public road, which is a town-owned road, and your average citizen might be forgiven for thinking they could use that road. So, and also, and this is really important, I think, it's not about what somebody does for a living. That's not what we're regulating. We're regulating how they're using the land. And in this case, the use of the land that a landscaping business would use there is identical to the way a farmer would use it. The building could be a farmer's building. The outbuildings could be the things they're storing there are all things that I store on my farm, right? So the use is identical of the land, and I think it's quite forgivable for any property owner to think they could use this for this purpose. So I think that I think it's entirely understandable the property owner has ended up where they are, and I think that that's a failure of the municipal zoning bylaw to appropriately provide opportunities for people to develop businesses that in a category that we badly need in the community, which is the kind of gap that we see all the time in our zoning bylaw because of how it's structured. So anyway, I'll get off the soapbox on that. I obviously can tell it's the kind of thing that rankles me. But anyway, so we have a recommendation on the table, or a motion on the table to amend. It's been moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Councillor Knight. Do you have another comment to it, Councillor Halpin? Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I do support buffering as part of the language for the benefit of the homeowner in the corner. Thank you, as mentioned by my
Those are
colleague.
good comments, and our staff will take them away if we approve this resolution. So it's been resolved by Halpin, seconded by Mayette, that council endorse option number 2 as presented. All in favor? And opposed? That is carried. So that moves us then on to the main recommendation. So I will offer a resolution that council refer bylaw 78/2023 to approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2023-053 to staff for amendments to enact council's direction. Clear enough? Mover and seconder, moved by Mayette, seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. All in favor and opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we are on to item 4, which is the Climate Emergency Just Transition Transfer. And we'll turn that over to, who has that one? Kristen Sears, our planning policy coordinator.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau, and through you. Good evening, Council. I'm here today regarding my staff report on the Climate Emergency Just Transition Transfer in hopes that Council will endorse the motion as circulated by the Township of Port Severn and forward it to the Natural Resource Minister and Finance Minister of Canada. To briefly summarize my report, the Just Transition Transfer Fund is an initiative created by the Climate Emergency Unit and would be further reviewed for implementation by the government. The fund is to be predominantly put towards renewable energy infrastructure, allowing communities dependent on fossil fuels a just transition. This motion on behalf of Saugeen Shores would be a call for action in response for the current climate crisis to curb greenhouse gas emissions provincially and federally. I thank you for your time and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So there is a recommended resolution. The council endorsed the climate emergency just transition transfer motion as circulated by the township of Port Severn, and that the resolution be forwarded to the Natural Resource Minister and Finance Minister of Canada. Questions or comments from members? I don't see any. I'll just make a comment. I don't support the resolution. And my problem is this notion that they've put in there about establishing a whole new agency to take $25 billion and spread it around. I think we got an awful lot of bureaucracy in this country already, and we don't need whole brand new agencies to do this. I'm pretty sure the federal government and the province could do this. I do believe that money is necessary to do this work, but I think that I couldn't put my stamp of approval on that notion. So I won't be supporting the resolution. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, then all in favor? Oh, I need a mover and seconder. My apologies. Mover and seconder. Moved by Mayette, seconded by Grace. Then all in favor and opposed. That's defeated. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the. Apologies. That brings us to the end of the reports of municipal officers, but we have some bylaws. And so I have a resolution that bylaws 78, 2023 and 101. Oh, sorry. Yes, my apologies. And I don't need to do anything with that. I can just, do I need to just skip over it? Okay. Apologies, everyone. So I have a resolution that bylaw 101, 2023 is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 20th day of November, 2023. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Halpin, seconded by Davinsky. Questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. And then the confirmatory bylaw, the bylaw 102, 2023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 20th day of November, 2023. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by Davinsky. All in favor? That's carried. And finally, I have a resolution that this regular council meeting of November 20th, 2023 hereby adjourns at 7:31 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Halpin. All in favor? Council stands adjourned, and have a good evening, everybody.